Picture this. You're standing barefoot in a soggy patch of land where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers like to throw temper tantrums every spring. It's 4000 BC-ish. You don't have shoes because nobody does yet, except maybe some guy upstream who swears woven reeds count as footwear. And you're wondering how on earth anyone thought settling here was a good... Everywhere you look, it's mud. Mud to your knees. Mud in your hair. Mud in your dinner. The rivers flood whenever they feel like it. And when they're not drowning everything you own, they're drying up like a bad party the morning after. The air smells like wet clay mixed with goat breath and the faint aroma of desperation because, let's be real, you didn't walk all this way for beachfront property that's underwater half the year. But someone, probably that guy who insists he's a visionary, points to this sludge-covered landscape and says, "Yeah, this is it, the future." You squint, trying to imagine more than a swamp full of mosquitoes the size of pomegranates. And the best you can come up with is maybe, possibly, a hut that doesn't immediately sink into the muck. The visionary claims the soil is fertile. Sure, if you like growing reeds. Because right now the only crops thriving here are the kind that cut your hands when you try to harvest them. So, you start building a hut. A mud hut, which is generous, because what you've actually created is a vaguely square pile of wet dirt that slumps over every time you look at it wrong. You slap more mud on top, hoping this time it won't cave in while you're sleeping. Spoiler alert. It will. But congratulations, you've invented architecture. Sort of. The neighbors, well, there's maybe 3 other families here, all regretting their life choices just as hard as you are, start doing the same thing. Soon, there's a cluster of lopsided huts that look less like civilization and more like a toddler tried to make castles at the beach after drinking too much fermented date juice. But hey, you've technically got a community now. People are sharing tools, trading fish for barley, and arguing over whose goat keeps pooping in the communal water ditch. Ah, the water ditch. The first public works project of humanity. It's a glorified trench meant to keep the huts from washing away every time the rivers go rogue. Instead, it just redirects the water directly into your neighbor's hut. Cue the first recorded neighborhood dispute in history. Lots of yelling, some aggressive stick waving, and a goat being used as a witness. This will later evolve into a little thing called laws. But for now, it's just 2 muddy people shouting your fault in ancient Sumerian proto-grunts. The thing is, despite the constant damp socks, if socks existed, and the ever-present stench of stagnant water, something strange starts happening. People are surviving here. The soil, once it dries out, really is good for planting. The rivers, chaotic as they are, bring enough nutrients to make barley grow like gossip in a small town. You're suddenly not just scavenging anymore, you're farming. You're putting seeds in the ground on purpose and eating something that doesn't try to eat you back. Revolutionary stuff. And as the first harvest comes in a scraggly, pitiful handful of grain that would make future farmers laugh their sandals off, you feel it. That weird flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this swamp could become something bigger. Maybe one day it won't just be mud huts and mosquito feasts. Maybe you're standing at the start. Well, you wouldn't call it a civilization yet, but definitely a place people can live without crying daily. Of course, that's assuming the rivers don't drown you next week. But hey, one problem at a time. For now, you've got mud under your nails, a half-standing hut, and a dream that this mess might actually work out. Fast forward a few floods later, because time here is basically measured in before the big flood. And after we dug that new ditch, you've gotten slightly better at keeping your hut upright. The mud walls don't collapse every time you sneeze now. Progress. But you've also learned that living between two unpredictable rivers is like trying to raise a family in a giant toddler's bathtub. Every so often, someone dumps a bucket of water on you just to see what happens. The visionary of your little cluster of huts, the same guy who convinced you this was a good idea in the first place, announces that he has a plan. His plan, naturally, involves you doing most of the digging. He calls it irrigation, which sounds fancy, but really means you and a dozen other exhausted swamp dwellers, with baskets and sticks carving little ditches into the earth, hoping the river water will politely flow where you tell it to. Spoiler alert, it won't. You're ankle deep in muck, sweating like you've offended the sun god personally, when the first real breakthrough happens. A crude channel actually works. Water trickles along the trench, obedient for once, soaking into the fields instead of your bed. Everyone cheers. Someone slaps your back hard enough to make you spit mud. And for one glorious moment, you feel like you've just bent nature to your will. Take that, rivers. You're the boss now. Of course, the rivers immediately remind you who's really in charge by flooding again a week later and undoing everything you built. Half your irrigation channels now lead directly into someone's living space. A goat is floating by on a piece of driftwood, bleating in existential confusion. The visionary blames bad luck. You suspect poor planning, but you're too tired to start a revolution, so you just start digging again. This is how the first engineering department of humanity is born. It's basically a bunch of muddy, sunburned people arguing over where water should go while trying not to drown in it themselves. Some genius invents the idea of levees, big walls of packed earth to keep the water at bay. You pile mud on mud, stump it flat, and pray to every god you've heard of that it holds. It doesn't. Not yet, anyway. But you're learning. And here's the thing. Each failed attempt makes the next one a little better. Slowly, painfully, you and your neighbors turn chaos into control. Water starts flowing to where crops are planted instead of randomly creating swamps in your living room. Harvests grow larger. People stop threatening to eat their own sandals in winter. The community expands because apparently, once you've got steady food, people flock to you like pigeons to breadcrumbs. One evening, you stand on a mound of dry earth, the only high ground that isn't underwater after the latest downpour, and look out at the patchwork of muddy huts, fields, and crooked irrigation trenches snaking across the land. It's not pretty. It's definitely not clean, but for the first time, you're not just surviving nature's mood swings, you're steering them, even if it feels like you're using a very wobbly wheel. The rivers are still wild, sure, but now you know their language. Dig here, block there, let this water in, keep that water out. You've traded in blind panic for calculated panic, which feels almost like progress. Civilization isn't glamorous yet, but it's starting to look like more than a cosmic prank. Oh, and as you collapse into your mud hut, exhausted, every muscle screaming mutiny, you realize something important. For the first time since you stepped into this swamp, you're not dreaming of leaving. You're dreaming of staying and making this place yours. So, you've got mud huts that don't collapse all the time, irrigation that mostly works, and food that doesn't try to murder you before you eat it. Life's good, right? Wrong. Because once humans aren't starving to death every other week, they immediately invent the next great pastime: arguing. And congratulations, you're living in the very first Howell meeting in human history, except there's no wine yet, just a lot of yelling and goats for emotional support. It starts small. Someone's goat keeps wandering into someone else's barley patch, and suddenly there's a shouting match so loud it makes the reed huts shake. Then someone accuses someone else of stealing their good mud bricks. Spoiler, they're all bad mud bricks. Before long, your peaceful little swamp town sounds like a reality TV show filmed in 4000 BCE. This week on The Real Housewives of Summer. Who stole my clay pot? Now, because humans can't just settle things with "stop stealing my stuff, Chad." They escalate. They invent rules. Not laws yet, mind you, but the proto-version. Don't let your goat ruin my crops, or I'll hex your next harvest. Stop taking my water ditch, or I'll tell everyone you can't count past 5. These aren't written down. Writing hasn't even been invented, but they spread fast through gossip, which, lucky you, travels at supersonic speed in a village where everyone can hear you sneeze from across the mud flats. And here's where it gets truly human. Someone decides the rules should come from a higher power. Enter the gods, or rather, enter the loudest guy in town who claims the gods talk to him directly and conveniently. The gods think his irrigation ditch should always get first dibs on water. Funny how divine will sound a lot like personal gain, huh? Suddenly, life's a lot more complicated. You're not just managing floods anymore. You're managing cosmic politics. The gods allegedly want offerings. They allegedly don't like when you skip their festivals. And apparently, they've got very specific opinions on who gets the best patch of dry land. You can't argue directly with the gods, so you argue with their representatives instead, which is basically like fighting a customer service line that never hangs up. Meanwhile, you're building shrines, tiny mud brick huts, dedicated to invisible beings you hope won't smite your crops. Offerings pile up, barley cakes, animal bones. That one clay figurine everyone swears looks like the goddess of fertility, but honestly looks more like a lumpy potato. The logic here? If you bribe the sky, maybe it won't send another flood. Humanity's first protection money scheme is born. But drama isn't limited to religion. Oh no, there are affairs to whisper about, arguments over who gets to marry whom, and a particularly tense standoff when two families claim the same fishing spot. By now, gossip is basically a currency. You trade it faster than you trade grain. One poorly timed rumor can tank someone's social standing harder than a collapsing mud hut. And yet, all this chaos is doing something strange. It's knitting you together. The arguments lead to rules. The rules lead to agreements. And the agreements lead to something dangerously close to not perfect order, not even good order, more like organized mess. But it's better than anarchy. One evening, sitting around a smoky fire while listening to a heated debate over whether the gods prefer sheep liver or goat liver, you realize something. People are staying. People are staying. Nobody's packing up to wander off anymore. Despite the drama, the gossip, and the endless goat-related disputes, you're building not just huts, but a society, a sticky, flawed, endlessly dramatic thing that somehow works. Civilization, it turns out, isn't born from great leaders or brilliant plans. It's born from neighbors screaming about water rights until someone invents rules, gods, and probably beer just to cope. The swamp is no longer just a mud spa for your bare feet and questionable hygiene choices. It's starting to look like an actual settlement. Mud huts rise taller. Irrigation ditches form a maze that only the local kids and drunk uncles can navigate. People aren't moving on anymore. They're sticking around, which means you've just unlocked humanity's next big upgrade. Stuff. At first, stuff is pretty basic. A clay pot here, a woven basket there, maybe a fishing net that doesn't immediately fall apart when wet. But it doesn't take long for someone, probably the same visionary who started this whole thing, to point at a random patch of land and declare, "This is mine." The idea spreads like fire in a thatched roof hut. Suddenly, you can own things, not just tools or goats, but dirt. Dirt is now valuable, and with value comes one thing: arguments louder than the goat wars of last season. People start drawing lines in the mud, claiming this patch of land or that corner of the ditch. There's no map, no measuring sticks. Just a lot of my grandfather squatted here first energy. Ownership is enforced by yelling, posturing, and occasionally whacking each other with sticks until one person backs down. Congratulations, you've just invented real estate complete with its first lawsuits, except they're settled with more shouting and fewer lawyers. And what's the point of owning stuff if you can't build bigger and better with it? Enter bricks. No, not the good kind. The you can build a 3-story mansion kind. These are sun-dried mud lumps that crumble if you look at them wrong. Still, they're sturdier than wet mud piles, and that's enough to start a building craze. Every family is stacking bricks higher, trying to outdo the neighbors. Your hut goes from one sad leaning room to 3 slightly less sad, still leaning room. Architecture, baby. But here's the kicker. All this building, owning, and ditch digging makes you thirsty. and water straight from the river tastes like regret and goat bath water. Enter the accidental miracle of beer. Someone leaves grain soaking in water too long. It ferments. Smells like bad bread soup. And people drink it anyway, because somehow it makes the endless sun, mud, and mosquito bites feel less like a curse from the gods. Before long, beer isn't just a drink. It's a currency, a social event, a solution to every dispute. Your neighbor floods your garden? Buy him off with a jug of beer. Someone insults your mud brick craftsmanship? Challenge them to a beer off. Loser pays the goat tax. Duck, you've basically invented happy hour, and it's the only thing keeping this proto-town from descending into full-time chaos. Beer leads to gatherings. Gatherings lead to storytelling. Storytelling leads to the first proto-bards dramatically exaggerating yesterday's ditch disaster until it sounds like a heroic battle against river demons. A shared history starts forming, told over mugs of slightly sour, slightly chunky brew that would make future Germans cry tears of disappointment. And amidst the muddy construction sites, the first beer taverns, and the endless shouting matches over land, you feel it. This swampy nightmare is transforming from a desperate survival camp to a village with rules, booze, and buildings that sometimes stay standing. There's order now, not much, but enough to make you believe that this isn't just random chaos, pretending to be progress. As you stumble home from an evening of drinking what is technically alcohol, but tastes like bread gone feral, you glance around at the flickering fires, the sound of laughter. Civilization is here, wobbly and tipsy, but here nonetheless. And tomorrow, you'll wake up with the first hangover in history and wonder what else humans can invent besides aspirin. It starts innocently enough. You're all just a bunch of swamp survivors trying to keep your huts upright and your goats from committing crop crimes. Then someone points at the sky and says, "The gods live up there, and they deserve a house." At first, this sounds absurd. The gods are invisible. Why would they need real estate when you're still sleeping on reeds? But the idea catches on because, let's face it, if you build the gods a nice place, maybe they'll stop drowning you every spring. Practical bribery, divine addition. So, you and your neighbors start piling mud bricks not for homes, not for walls, but for what will become the first temple. Picture it. A big, square-ish platform of sun-baked mud, each layer stacked higher while you're sweating enough to fill another irrigation ditch. The project drags on for months. The bricks keep crumbling. The visionary turned high priest keeps shouting vague instructions like, "Make it taller." The gods love altitude. Meanwhile, you're wondering if these gods have ever actually mentioned their fondness for multi-story architecture, or if this is just an ancient scam for free labor. And here's the thing. The moment that mud platform rises above everyone's huts, something shifts. Whoever controls the temple, the self-proclaimed messenger of the gods, suddenly has power. Real power. People start lining up to offer barley cakes, sheep, or their best goat in exchange for divine favor, which looks suspiciously like the priest keeping the offerings for himself. Religion, it seems, doubles as the first tax system. Now you're not just living in a swamp village, you're living in a hierarchy. The temple isn't just a house for the gods, it's a stage for the first big human power trip. Someone sits at the top, claims they've got the gods on speed dial, and everyone else suddenly has to listen. Forget democracy. You've invented bureaucracy with extra incense. It doesn't stop there. The temple needs workers, guards, and accountants guys who just count sheep badly but wear very serious expressions. Rules multiply. Payments to the gods increase. You're told exactly when to pray, where to stand, and how to properly bow without offending whichever deity supposedly owns this real estate. Congrats. You've gone from free swamp dweller to citizen of a system, and you didn't even get a free barley beer out of the deal. But here's the kicker. Despite the politics, the power plays, and the obvious corruption, because let's be honest, no god needs that many sheep. The temple brings something new. Unity. The place becomes a center for feasts, festivals, and gossip sessions, disguised as prayer meetings. People gather, sing, dance, tell stories, and argue less about water rights, at least for a day. And while you're staring at this mud brick mountain dedicated to invisible landlords, you can't help but feel a little proud. Somehow, your chaotic swamp town went from scattered huts to organized religion in the blink of a few generations. You're still getting bitten by mosquitoes. You still smell like river slime. But now you're part of something bigger, a city in the making, built on faith, fear, and a lot of unpaid labor. One evening, you climb to the top of the half-finished temple platform. The sun is sinking, painting the river's gold. Below you, your village looks different. There's order in the chaos now. Fields lined neatly, huts forming real streets, smoke rising from hearths where families laugh and argue. Civilization isn't just surviving anymore, it's performing. And you're both the audience and the cast, trapped in the first ever play called society. And as you glance up at the stars, you swear you can hear the gods chuckling at the madness you've built in their name. Or maybe that's just your neighbor still yelling about a stolen goat. Hard to tell the difference. You wake up one morning to find the swamp buzzing like a beehive dipped in fermented date wine. Something's different. It's not the usual yelling about goats trespassing or someone's ditch redirecting water into someone else's sleeping area. No. Today the yelling has a rhythm to it. People are shouting numbers. Turns out, someone had a brilliant idea overnight. Instead of just swapping things, your fish for their barley, your barley for their badly woven sandals, why not assign value to everything? Congratulations, you've stumbled into the invention of an economy. At first, it sounds simple. Barley is king. Everything is worth a certain amount of grain. Want a new clay pot? 2 handfuls of barley. A fishing net. A basketful. A goat? They'll cost you half a year's harvest and probably your dignity in a loud bargaining session. Suddenly, everyone's pockets are metaphorically full of barley. which is fine until you remember it rots, attracts mice, and is suspiciously easy to steal. So begins humanity's first bout of inflation, where everyone's rich in theory but broke in practice, because the grain mysteriously vanishes before you can spend it. Markets spring up almost overnight. Picture this, a muddy clearing in the center of town, crowded with people yelling over each other like a prehistoric stock exchange. Vendors line up with fish, woven mats, half-dry bricks, questionable beer, and a single sad cow someone's trying to trade for 3 goats and a promise of eternal friendship. There are no stalls yet, just blankets on the mud, and people stepping on each other's merchandise. And it smells, well, let's say if sweat, river fish, and goat droppings had a love child. This market would be its proud parent. The noise is overwhelming. Every conversation is a haggle. Nobody accepts the first price offered. Deals are sealed not with contracts but with a loud "I swear by the temple gods" and a handshake covered in who knows what. You're trying to trade for some pottery when the seller starts throwing in extras like a cracked spoon and insists it's a bargain. You don't want the spoon. Nobody wants the spoon. But suddenly the whole crowd is invested in whether you'll accept, and you do, just to end the shouting match. Congratulations. You've just been scammed in the world's first upsell. But here's where it gets truly hilarious. You start noticing patterns. The guy selling beer has started watering it down, but he's advertising it as extra refreshing. The fishmonger swears his catch is fresh, but you saw him digging it out of the riverbank sludge this morning. A woman is selling luxury reeds for weaving, which looks suspiciously like the free reeds growing 2 feet away. It dawns on you. Humans invented marketing before they invented soap. The first ads are nothing but loud voices and bigger lies. Barley becomes the backbone of everything. Taxes? Paid in barley. Temple offerings. Barley. Bribes to avoid digging another irrigation ditch this week. More barley. The priests, naturally, claim it's all part of the gods' grand plan. The gods apparently have a very healthy appetite for cereal grains, considering the temple granaries are overflowing while you're counting every stalk left in your field. The system feels rigged, but what can you do? Civilization now has an economy, and it's just as unfair as the modern version. Only sweatier and with more goats involved. As the market grows, so does the mud. You can't walk 3 steps without losing a sandal or your entire foot in a puddle that smells like fermented despair. Someone suggests laying down planks to make a walkway. The planks sink within an hour. People start calling the market a swamp of deals, half jokingly, half seriously. The name sticks. Even the gods probably laugh at the mess from their newly built temple balcony. Then comes the innovation that changes everything. Scribbles on clay. Some clever person, probably sick of arguing whether they paid for that goat, already starts scratching symbols into wet tablets to keep records. Birth of accounting. And let me tell you, the first accountants were not popular. Suddenly there's a receipt that says you owe more barley than you remember promising. The other guy insists it's true because, hey, it's written down. Writing, you discover, is a double-edged sword. It keeps track of trades, sure, but it also makes scams look official. Humanity has invented bureaucracy, and it's only slightly less annoying than flood. One day you find yourself at the market, clutching your basket of barley, trying to buy a jug of beer after a long week of digging trenches for someone else's private irrigation rights. The seller raises the price mid-haggle because apparently the gods demand more sacrifices this season. You're tired, sweaty, broke, and your patience is thinner than a sun-dried fish. You hand over the barley anyway. You need that drink, and as you stand there, sipping your questionable beer, while someone yells about a goat-related debt in the background, you realize something important. Civilization hasn't made life easy. It's just made it busier. More rules, more deals, more shouting. But also, strangely, more connection. More people, more stories, more moments where you're laughing with your neighbor over a spilled basket of grain and thinking, civilization's messy, loud, and unfair. But for the first time in human history, it feels alive, and you can't shake the feeling that this market, with all its scams, smells, and noise, is where the heartbeat of humanity has started to drum for real. It was bound to happen. Give humans enough mud huts, beer, barley, money, and gossip, and someone will eventually stand up, puff out their chest, and declare, I'm in charge now. And just like that, your once chaotic swamp town takes its first shaky step toward monarchy, aka one guy tells everyone else what to do because he said so loudly enough. It starts small, like all bad ideas do. The market keeps growing. The temple priests keep taking more barley for the gods. And suddenly, there are too many people crammed together in this muddy mess. That's when the whispers begin. We need someone to keep order, someone says. Someone to decide who gets the best land, who digs which ditch, who stops Chad's goats from becoming a public menace. Enter that guy. Let's call him Enkar, because he's got the kind of name people shout when they're angry and throwing clay pots. Enkar isn't officially elected. There's no voting, no ceremony, no divine lightning bolt crowning his head. He just walks into the middle of the market one day, climbs onto a basket of barley, and shouts, I speak for the gods now, and also for all of you. You're welcome. Nobody asked him to, but the temple priests nod approvingly because he promises to keep their granaries full. And the strongest guys in town stand behind him holding big sticks. Congratulations, you've invented politics. And what's the first thing every leader decides they need? A wall. A nice, big, look how important we are. Wall to keep out. Well, nobody's entirely sure. Raiders, wild animals, angry ex-neighbors from upriver who are still salty about that irrigation ditch you stole last year. Either way, you're handed a basket and told to start hauling mud. Again, building the first wall is like trying to stack wet bread into a skyscraper. The bricks crumble. The ditch you're using for water keeps flooding the construction site. And everyone's arguing over whether the wall should be straight or curved like the river gods intended. Still, over weeks of sweat, sunburn, and swearing in Proto-Sumerian. Something resembling a barrier rises around your little city. It's not much more of a glorified speed bump than a fortress, but it feels monumental. For the first time, you've marked a boundary. Inside is us. Outside is them. You've invented city pride and xenophobia in the same stroke. Of course, a wall without an enemy feels silly. Cue the first skirmishes. Some people upriver don't like that. You've been hogging water for your barley fields. They march down with sticks, stones, and very angry goats, shouting curses that translate roughly to give us back our ditch or eat sand. What follows isn't exactly a war. It's more like a chaotic brawl, where everyone runs around screaming, throwing mud, and occasionally whacking each other with reeds. Half the battle is just trying not to trip in the swamp, but still, blood is spilled, huts burn, and suddenly the idea of fighting for your city is born. Enkar, smelling opportunity, declares himself not just leader, but protector. Protector sounds better than guy yelling orders. After the war, he struts through the muddy streets, collecting barley for defense funds, which mostly end up in his personal beer stash. But people cheer anyway because apparently victory tastes like someone else doing all the thinking for you. Just like that, a king is crowned not with gold, not even with a fancy hat, but with sheer audacity and a well-timed speech. Oh, and kings need soldiers. You're no longer just a farmer or a ditch digger. You're now drafted into what passes for the first standing army. Training consists of hit this stick until you're tired. Now go stand on the wall and look intimidating. The weapons are laughable. Pointy sticks, rocks in slings, and the occasional rusty copper dagger that everyone shares. But the idea is intoxicating. You're not just a swamp dweller anymore. You're a defender of the city-state. It sounds impressive, right up until you realize you're mostly just standing knee-deep in mud, swatting mosquitoes, waiting for someone to throw a rock at you. Over time, though, this whole organized fighting thing gets more sophisticated. People figure out how to make sharper spears, sturdier shields, and even chariots that look like a child's attempt at a cart but still manage to scare the enemy because, wow, wheels. And every little skirmish, every ditch, dispute turned battle makes your city stronger, more united, and let's be honest, a lot more arrogant. Enkar declares that the gods clearly favor him. Because why else would you still be alive? The temple nods along. The barley taxes go up, and suddenly your protector is living in the biggest hut anyone's ever seen. The first palace, if you can call a mud brick mansion with bad plumbing a palace, rises next to the temple. One night, you're sitting on the half-finished wall, staring out at the endless flatlands beyond, and you realize something. 100 generations ago, people wandered riversides, eating whatever didn't kill them. 100 years ago, you were just surviving in a swamp, praying the floods wouldn't take everything. Now, you're part of a city-state, a walled community with markets, temples, soldiers, rulers, a place with a name, an identity, a story to tell. And yet, it feels precarious, like everything could fall apart with one bad flood or one louder, angrier man from the next city overclaiming his gods said he should be king. But for now, you've got walls to hide behind, a leader shouting promises he might not keep, and enough barley beer to make you forget how fragile it all is. Civilization has found its swagger, and you're along for the muddy, chaotic ride. You thought digging ditches for irrigation was the worst thing civilization could throw at you. Then came the walls, the wars, and the king, who shouts more than he thinks. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could prepare you for this next invention. Yet harmlessly enough, one particularly fed-up priest, tired of having barley counting arguments every market day, picks up a wet clay tablet and starts scratching marks into it with a reed stylus. "See," he says smugly, "now there's proof that you do owe me 3 baskets of grain." You blink because apparently this guy just invented the first receipts, and your life is about to become a never-ending clay paper trail. At first, it seems like a good idea. No more shouting matches over goat trades, or whether you actually repaid that beer debt from last week. Transactions are recorded, meaning a clay slab tells everyone who owes what. But quickly, you realize you've unleashed a monster. Writing is power. Whoever controls the tablets controls reality. If the tablet says you promised 10 goats instead of 2, guess what you now owe 10 goats. Can't argue with official records, can you? Soon, writing spreads like a bad rumor. The priests love it, because now they can track temple offerings without relying on memory. The king loves it, because now taxes are carved in clay, making them harder to forget. Though strangely, he never forgets to raise them. A new class of people emerges. Scribes. They sit hunched over clay tablets all day, making tiny wedge-shaped marks, grumbling about how no one appreciates their art, while secretly controlling the entire economy. And they're not just writing numbers. Oh no, they're writing names, tallying land, recording marriages, listing temple rules so long and complicated that by the end, you've forgotten why you came to the temple in the first place. Before you know it, bureaucracy is born. You can't dig a ditch, build a hut, or buy a goat without someone stamping a clay tablet that says you're allowed to. The swamp that once had no rules now has too many. And they're all written down in a language that looks like bird footprints. This is when the first office is created. It's a dim, stuffy mud brick room, stacked with clay tablets that all smell faintly of mildew and regret. Scribes sit there, scratching symbols, muttering to themselves about barley quotas, while desperate citizens like you queue outside for hours just to get permission to extend your hut by 2 bricks. The only thing missing is a coffee machine and passive-aggressive wall art saying, "Love, love, love." And because every system needs loopholes, official whispers start circulating. Want a tablet to magically say you paid your taxes? Slip the scribe a little extra barley under the table. Want a record of that embarrassing debt to mysteriously vanish? A jug of beer can make clay surprisingly soft and easy to accidentally smudge. Corruption enters the chat before honesty ever gets a seat at the table. But the biggest headache of all, nobody agrees on what half the symbols mean. Early writing is messy. One scribe says a mark means 3 goats. Another says it means 3 jars of beer. And suddenly, you're standing in front of an angry priest who thinks you stiffed the gods out of livestock you never owned. Arguments escalate. Someone throws a tablet. It doesn't break. You throw another tablet. That one hits the king's tax collector. Congratulations. You've invented the first paperwork-related riot. Still, writing has its upsides. History starts happening on purpose. Instead of relying on old drunks around the fire to half remember how the last flood went, you've got tablets that tell you exactly how high the water rose, what was lost, and which goats survived. Songs and stories get etched in clay, turning legends into something tangible. Future generations will look back and think you all had it together, not knowing half of what's written down is gossip, bribes, or bad math. One day, you're watching a scribe at work. The sun is setting, painting the sky with molten gold. The man's hands are caked with clay, his reed stylus tapping out little wedges like the heartbeat of your growing city. Around you, markets hum, walls stand taller. The temple looms, and life feels complicated. So many rules, so many records, so many whispers, that if you don't play the game right, the clay will say you never existed. You remember when life was just mud huts and floods. No tablets telling you who you were supposed to be. Now your name is scratched into clay somewhere in a dusty storeroom, alongside debts, promises, prayers, and arguments over goats. You're part of history now, not just a wandering survivor. And you can't decide if that feels like progress or a trap. Civilization hasn't just learned to speak. It's learned to write. And writing, you realize, isn't just remembering. It's control. It's power baked in clay. And once someone's carved your life into a tablet, there's no taking it back. Your city isn't the only muddy miracle on the block anymore. Word's gotten out apparently. Settling down instead of wandering the wilderness like a confused goat is all the rage. Up and down the rivers, other groups are building their own little swamp empires. Irrigation systems, temples, walls, beer, taverns. The whole package. And like any good human story, as soon as more than one group of people has something worth stealing, politics gets invented. It starts with tension you can feel in the air, like a bad smell drifting in from upriver. Traders bring news of rival settlements. If I've got fields 3 times as big as ours, someone whispers, and their barley ferments better too. Before long, your city's mood shifts from we're proud of surviving to we're clearly superior, right? Right. Cue the first recorded passive-aggressive nationalism. Your king, Enkar, is suddenly obsessed with looking important. He declares your city's walls the strongest in the land, which everyone knows is a lie because the last rainstorm took out half of them. He throws festivals of power, where he parades around in fancier mud-stained robes, while you and every other unlucky citizen build him a bigger throne out of stolen bricks. The priests pretend to be impressed. Everyone else rolls their eyes. Meanwhile, envoys start arriving from other cities. They show up sweaty, travel-worn, and very smug. They bring gifts which is ancient code for look how rich we are compared to you. A goat with gold-painted horns here. A fancy clay jug there. One city-state even sends a scribe carrying a tablet filled with insults, disguised as polite greetings. May your walls be as tall as your wisdom, which, considering your walls are still half a joke, doesn't feel like a compliment. Your city responds in kind, of course. Scribes hastily carve out their own messages, claiming your gods are obviously stronger. Your beer is world-class, and your irrigation ditches are the envy of every settlement this side of the Euphrates. It's the first version of Twitter beef, but with clay tablets and slightly fewer spelling mistakes. But not all encounters are just sass and goat bribery. Sometimes other cities want things. Water rights, grazing land, access to that one swamp patch where fish practically leap into baskets. At first, these disputes are solved with yelling matches. Kings glare at each other over long wooden tables, while priests mutter prayers for wisdom that sound suspiciously like "Don't let this idiot start a war." And then, because people are people, someone inevitably loses their temper. Spears are grabbed, messengers are insulted, a clay tablet gets smashed in dramatic protest. Boom, instant war. Ancient war is less epic clash of titans and more chaotic bar brawl with extra mud. Warriors charge, screaming, armed with sticks, slings, and the occasional copper weapon, if someone's rich enough. Walls crumble because they were never built to withstand more than a goat's sneeze. By the end, half the fighters are covered in bruises. Everyone smells like swamp water, and neither side remembers what the fight was actually about. But the gods are thanked for victory anyway, even when both sides lost more huts than they gained. After one too many of these wars, everyone gets tired of watching their grain stores burn. Someone suggests talking instead of stabbing, a wild concept that might just save a few goats. This is how the first real diplomacy happens. Awkward meetings under makeshift tents where sweaty men in reed skirts argue for hours about water access, who gets to use which fishing spot, and whether accidentally redirecting a river counts as an act of war. The negotiations are painful. No one trusts anyone. Everyone insists their gods are on their side. Half the meeting is spent threatening to walk out. The other half is spent trying to invent a treaty using clay tablets and promises everyone knows will be broken within a season. Still, when the meeting ends, there's less stabbing than usual. That's progress. And in between all this drama, something unexpected grows. Trade. Once you stop stealing from other cities, you start swapping your surplus grain for their fancy copper tools, your wool for their exotic fish sauce that tastes suspiciously like regret, but sells well in your market anyway. Roads form where traders walk so often the mud hardens. Foreign words slip into your language. A pot from far away sits in your hut, proof that other worlds exist beyond your city walls. One evening, you're sitting on the wall, what's left of it after the last skirmish, watching traders pass through your gates. The air hums with 100 different accents. Smells of strange spices and the sound of deals being made. Your city feels bigger than it ever has. Not just a swamp village clinging to survival, but part of a web of humans trying, failing, and occasionally succeeding to live together without burning everything down. You realize something monumental. Civilization isn't just bricks, barley, and walls anymore. It's relationships. Fragile, tense, ridiculous relationships between people and places that might hate each other today, but trade beer tomorrow. And for the first time, you can imagine a world not just of city-states glaring across the rivers, but of connections spanning beyond the horizon. If humans can ever stop throwing clay tablets at each other long enough to talk. Remember Enkar, your self-appointed king, with the charisma of a drunk goat and the organizational skills of a collapsing mud hut. Well, apparently, ruling isn't just about yelling orders and stealing everyone's body anymore. No. Now, it's about image. Somewhere between the last-ditch dispute and the latest awkward treaty meeting with the neighbors, your king has decided he needs something bigger than muscle and walls to keep everyone in line. He needs divine branding. It begins with a clay tablet proclamation delivered to every hut. Enkar is chosen by the gods themselves. You choke on your questionable beer because you've seen this guy trip over his own sandals too many times to buy that story. But the temple priests nod solemnly. The scribes start carving this truth into every available slab of clay. And just like that, you're living under history's first PR campaign. The temple gets involved immediately because nothing says holy authority like a giant mud brick structure looming over your hut. Suddenly, Enkar isn't just king. He's king by divine mandate. Statues pop up in his likeness, or at least what sculptors think he looks like. It's basically a lumpy potato with a beard. Hymns are composed in his honor, sung off-key by terrified villagers during mandatory celebrations of leadership. If you squint, you can already see where propaganda is heading for the next few millennia. But PR isn't just for kings. The gods get their own rebranding too. Gone are the vague, mysterious river spirits you bribed with barley cakes in the early days. Now you've got a fully organized pantheon, with family drama more complicated than a modern soap opera. Priests recite carefully curated official stories of how the gods chose your city above all others, how the king is basically their BFF, and how disobeying him is the same as spitting in a god's face. Subtlety isn't a thing yet, but intimidation, that's thriving. The king, drunk on barley beer, and his new divine Rasuma, starts throwing grand parades. Picture this. Enkar struts through the market atop a wobbly cart dragged by terrified donkeys, while trumpeters blast notes so wrong they scare birds out of trees. Scribes rush around, documenting how glorious it all is, making sure future generations will read about a triumph that looks, to you, like a badly organized goat auction. People cheer because not cheering gets you a stern talking to from temple guards wielding clubs and divine approval slips. Soon, this PR campaign spreads beyond your city's walls. Messengers are dispatched to neighboring city-states carrying gifts, aka bribes, and tablets reading, "Our king rules by the will of the gods. You should definitely think twice before fighting us again." It's diplomacy dressed as religion. Intimidation carved in clay. And surprisingly, it works. Some neighbors hesitate to attack when they're told your king has divine backup, even though everyone knows the gods are probably too busy arguing about sheep livers to pick sides in human politics. But power has a way of attracting challengers. One ambitious warlord upriver claims his gods told him he's the rightful king of your city. He even has his own priests, own clay tablets, own badly carved statues to prove it. Congratulations, you've just invented political propaganda wars. Tablets fly back and forth, each side claiming divine legitimacy louder than the other. When words fail, spears follow, and your city braces for yet another messy, swampy showdown over whose imaginary friends have better taste in monarchs. Meanwhile, common folks like you can't help but notice a pattern. The gods seem very interested in keeping kings rich and fed, while you're still ankle-deep in mud, trying to stretch your barley rations through winter. When you point this out, a priest assures you the gods work in mysterious ways, and that more offerings will definitely fix your problems. Somehow, you suspect the offerings are mainly fixing their beer supply. And yet, propaganda isn't all bad news. The king's obsession with image brings new art to the city. Walls are decorated with carvings of great battles that were mostly won by luck. Temples commission murals, showing the king shaking hands with gods that look suspiciously like his uncles. Storytellers, paid in beer and flattery, roam the markets performing epic sagas about Enkar's legendary wisdom, conveniently leaving out his tendency to confuse left and right during military drills. One night, you stand in the temple courtyard, watching a newly built statue of Enkar being unveiled. It's massive, towering over the crowd, his clay eyes staring blankly into eternity. The priests chant, the crowd cheers half-heartedly, and the king beams like a man who truly believes the gods text him personally every morning. You take a sip of beer and wonder, is this progress, or just a fancier, louder version of the same old survival game? Civilization, you realize, isn't just about building walls and growing food anymore. It's about stories. Stories carved in clay, sung in temples, shouted from carts, all designed to make one man look like he's holding the world together with divine duct tape. But whether or not you believe, it doesn't matter. But enough people do, and that belief builds power stronger than any mud wall. And as you shuffle home under the shadow of a king's propaganda statue, you can't help but laugh. This whole civilization thing might just be the world's longest-running PR stunt, and you're living right in the middle of the first ad campaign in history. By now, your swampy village turned city is barely recognizable. There are walls, temples, markets, and holy parades that look like chaotic theater productions with more mud than magic. The king's statues glared down at you from every corner. Priests hum dramatically about divine order, and the scribes keep scratching their little wedge marks like they're writing the universe into existence. One tablet at a time. Civilization. Baby, it's loud, sweaty, and smells faintly of goat poop. But today, you're about to witness humanity's next great innovation. Taxes. At first, taxes are just called offerings. You hand over a chunk of your barley or a goat every now and then, so the gods don't drown your hut again. Seems fair enough. But then, the king who now insists on being called God King, because apparently mortals don't get to boss around this much mud, realizes that if he's divine, he deserves more than just surviving. He deserves luxury. And luxury costs barley. Lots of barley. So one morning, you wake up to find a shiny new clay tablet nailed to the temple wall. It declares that every household must contribute a small portion of their harvest to support divine rule, ensure peace, and maintain the glory of the city. Small portion, huh? If by small they mean half your grain storage, plus the goat you actually liked. The collectors arrive the next day. Burly men with sticks and big smiles that don't quite reach their eyes. They kindly remind you of your civic duty, weighing your barley baskets with exaggerated frowns and muttering about shortfalls. Somehow, no matter how much you give, you're always a little short. The missing amount, they say, is due to royal fees, transport costs, or the ever-popular "the gods demand more this month." It's the first time in history someone has stolen from you while claiming it's for your own good. And taxes aren't just grain anymore. No. The system evolves rapidly. Work taxes. Got two strong arms? Congratulations. You're volunteering to build another temple wall or palace annex. They call it a public project. You call it free labor under the hot sun with a side of heat stroke. Military taxes. Can't pay in grain? Great news. You can serve as a war contribution, which is a fancy way of saying you're sent to wave a spear at the neighbors who stole last season's fish trade. Festival taxes. Yes, even parties aren't free. The king throws a feast for the people, then charges you for the privilege of attending, eating food you technically already provided in taxes. And just like that, your daily life shifts. You're no longer farming for your family. You're farming for divine order. Your sweat fills the temple granaries, fattens palace feasts, and keeps scribes busy counting your contributions. Every bite of bread you eat tastes faintly of someone yelling at you for not working fast enough. Naturally, people grumble, quietly, at first. You mutter to your neighbor about how the king's hut is starting to look suspiciously like a palace, while yours still leaks every time the gods sneeze. They mutter back that priests are eating better than the gods themselves. These whispers grow into murmurs, murmurs into low growls, and soon the whole market buzzes with complaints. But the king is no fool, he knows power needs maintenance. Enter backroom deals. While common folk like you are getting bled dry, city bigwigs, the wealthiest farmers, most connected traders, and temple favorites start making arrangements. Extra barley buys you protection from overzealous tax collectors. A goat gifted to the palace guard gets your name accidentally left off the labor duty list. Bribes and favors create a shadow system where the rich float above the rules while you're still knee-deep in swamp mud, coughing on dust from yet another royal construction project. And every attempt to challenge this divine order hits a wall, literally and figuratively. The scribes record your protests as disruptive. The priests declare your discontent an insult to the gods. And the king's enforcers make sure you reconsider your tone. You learn quickly that surviving civilization isn't about fairness. It's about knowing who to flatter, who to bribe, and when to keep your head down. Yet, here's the twisted brilliance of it all. Taxes and deals keep the city running. Roads are built muddy and full of potholes, but still, new irrigation canals extend fields, and soldiers with sharper spears keep raiders mostly at bay. The system is broken, rigged, unfair, but it's bigger than any one person now. It has momentum. Civilization isn't just huts and barley anymore. It's a machine grinding forward on the backs of people like you. One night, you're hauling a tax basket up to the temple granary. Your hands are blistered, your back aches, and you're wondering why the gods need this much grain when everyone's still eating stew that tastes like sadness. At the top of the granary steps you pause. The city sprawls below you. Lights flickering, voices echoing. The market hums, walls stand tall. The temple towers high, and the palace glows faintly under torchlight. You realize something brutal and brilliant at the same time. This entire city, the walls, the markets, the temples, the king's bloated beer belly runs on you. On your labor, your grain, your silent endurance. You're the blood pumping through civilization's veins. And that's exactly why they'll never let you stop. Civilization, it turns out, isn't built on greatness. It's built on a long line of exhausted, overtaxed people hauling baskets of barley under a starlit sky, keeping the dream alive for someone else's glory. After enough seasons of backbreaking labor, crooked taxes, and kings who collect statues like some people collect questionable sandals, you'd think life in your city-state would settle into a dull routine. But no, humans can't just survive, they need stories. Big, loud, over-the-top stories that make the madness feel meaningful. So, naturally, myths are born. It starts with harmless fireside tales, farmers spinning yarns about river spirits, saving their crops, or heroic ancestors who punched floods in the face. These are bedtime stories, little sparks of hope to distract from the mud under your nails, and the tax collector breathing down your neck. But soon, storytellers get ambitious. They don't just tell tales, they perform them. They exaggerate until every fish caught was a monster battle. Every wall built was by the chosen of the gods. Every random hunter who chased a goat for half a mile becomes a legendary figure destined for song, and people eat it up like barley bread in a world where life is mostly sweat, hunger, and yelling about irrigation ditches. Why wouldn't you want to believe your town is the center of a cosmic drama? Myths spread faster than a goat in an open grain store. Before long, you can't walk through the market without hearing some self-proclaimed bard declaiming tales of Enkar, the mighty, the god king who wrestled the sun, or the great beer flood of yesteryear. Yes, even beer gets its own myths. One popular story claims that the first brewer stole the recipe from the gods themselves, and every cup you drink is a sip of divine rebellion. People love this one, especially after their third jug. But myths don't stop at the gods and kings. They spawn something brand new in human history. Celebrities. Not the kind who can act or sing, because nobody's invented those yet, but people who've done anything remotely interesting. A hunter who claims to have killed a lion, instant hero. A priest who says they spent 3 days in the underworld and came back with secrets and a suspiciously fancy necklace. Legend. A trader who swears they saw a mountain of gold in a far-off land. Icon. The best part. The stories snowball with every retelling. That lion? Now it had 2 heads. The underworld trip? Now the priest wrestled demons and invented fire on the way back. That mountain of gold? Now it's guarded by a giant snake that breathes plague. Accuracy isn't the point. Drama is. Soon, myths and gossip intertwine until you can't tell divine truth from market rumor. Clay tablets circulate with heroic biographies, scribes embellishing details for a handful of barley. Crowds gather for live reenactments, where half the actors forget their lines and improvise awkwardly, turning epics into accidental comedies. Someone starts carving fan art of your heroes into walls, only for a drunk mason to give one of them goat ears. Congratulations, you've invented tabloids and fanfiction simultaneously. And because humans can't leave a good mess alone, myths become a political weapon. Kings commission bards to update their own heroic tales. Yesterday's embarrassing military defeat, today's glorious tactical retreat ordered by the gods. That rival city's warlord, obviously descended from demons, just ask the temple. They've got tablets to prove it. Myths are no longer just stories. They're ancient clickbait, designed to sway hearts, minds, and maybe a few barley baskets at election, coronation time. Even you get caught up in the madness. One evening, you find yourself in the town square, watching a play about the city's founding. The actor playing your king looks nothing like him. This one has muscles. The city's humble mud huts are portrayed as marble palaces, and the great battle of the swamp raiders is reenacted with more dancing than fighting. The crowd cheers, tears up, and believes every ridiculous second of it. You stand there thinking, we were all there, and it wasn't like this at all. But you don't say a word because the beer cellar is right next to you. And honestly, it's more fun to let the myth win. And here's the kicker. These stories outlive reality. The flood that destroyed half the city, future kids will hear it was a test from the gods. Survived only because the king shouted the rain away. The massive tax hike that starved your neighbors, it becomes a noble sacrifice for the greater glory of the people. Even the awkward guy who slipped on fish guts in the market last week will be immortalized in a clay carving as the hero who conquered the slippery beast. One night, under a smoky torch-lit sky, you realize myths are more than just entertainment. They're civilization's first memory filter, a way to turn suffering into purpose, failure into epic, kings into demigods, and life in the mud into something worth bragging about. Truth gets bent, stomped on, and baked into whatever shape people need to sleep better at night. You take a sip of beer and laugh. The city might crumble someday. The king's statues will erode, his taxes forgotten. But the stories, oh, those will survive, growing taller and wilder, with each retelling until your entire history looks like one long, glorious fever dream. And in that moment, humanity just discovered a new kind of immortality, not in stone, not in power, but in tales that get better the further they drift from the truth. Your city has walls, temples, scribes, taxes that make your soul ache, and enough myths to fill a dozen clay libraries. Life has become a complicated, mud-caked machine. And just when you think it can't get any messier, someone gets a bright idea. Let's send our stuff farther than the next swamp over. Trade, the kind that stretches beyond shouting distance, is born. At first, it's just a few brave fools hauling barley and beer upriver, hoping to swap it for copper tools or fancy dyed cloth from places you've only heard about in drunk fisherman stories. But soon, actual routes form little footpaths winding through hostile swamps, over dry, cracked plains, along riverbanks that smell like fish and regret. And that's when you meet the ancient world's biggest problem, since goats learned how to trespass. Bandits. Bandits don't farm. They don't build. They don't write poetry, unless give me all your barley, or I'll club you counts as verse. They lurk on trade paths like swamp crocodiles with bad haircuts, waiting for your caravan to pass by. You've barely gone half a day's walk before someone jumps out of the reeds yelling toll, which is ancient code for hand over everything, including your shoes. The first long-distance trade trip you join is a disaster from the start. You're hauling 2 baskets of barley, a jug of beer you swore you wouldn't drink, but already cracked open, and a few pottery trinkets to swap for shiny copper knives. The path is little more than mud and goat droppings. The sun's melting you alive, and your traveling companions can't agree on which direction north is because nobody's invented a compass yet. By day 2, you're convinced half of you won't survive not from bandits, but from arguing yourselves to death over where to camp. And then the bandits show up. They're a ragtag crew with sticks, slings, and bad attitudes, demanding taxes for safe passage. You know it's a scam. They know you know it's a scam. But since you're outnumbered, and your only weapon is a jug of beer half empty, you hand over some goods and mutter curses under your breath. The bandits vanish laughing, And just like that, toll booths have been invented, the kind where you get nothing in return, except trauma and lighter baskets. Word gets back to the city about the dangers of trade. Kings and priests start panicking, not because you lost your stuff, but because they lost their cut of the profits. So they invent escorts, armed guards to protect caravans. But guards want payment too. Suddenly, you're paying taxes in the city to trade, protection fees on the road to trade, and tribute to the next city just for daring to walk through their mud. Congratulations, international commerce is here. And it's just a pyramid scheme with extra dust and fear of ambushes. Still, the rewards are too good to stop. Foreign traders arrive in your city with things you've never seen before. Brilliant blue stones, strange spices that make stew taste less like swamp water, harder metals that don't bend after one hit. These goods are mesmerizing, almost magical, and your king immediately declares them exclusive royal imports. Meaning, of course, you won't see them unless you're building his next palace and happen to steal a glimpse of his dinner table. This is how you learn about the world's first corporate lies. The king's scribes and priests start carving clay advertisements. Our city produces the finest beer in all the lands. It still tastes like someone soaked bread in goat sweat. Our rulers guarantee safe trade routes. Tell that to the bandits gnawing on your sandals halfway to the next town. Foreign goods only arrive through our blessed city. Half the caravans just bypass you because your tolls are worse than the bandits. And yet, people believe it. Traders brag about being from your city to get better deals elsewhere. Neighboring kings pay tribute just to ally with your powerful trade empire. The myths, the PR, the bravado all combine to make your city look like the beating heart of a glorious commercial network. When in reality, half your goods are stolen, the other half soggy, and the roads you claim to control are basically bandit playgrounds. But something bigger is happening. Beneath the scams and mudslides, trade routes link people like threads weaving a wild, uneven tapestry. You hear new languages, new jokes, even new swear words that make your city's insults feel quaint. Ideas slip in along with the goods, new farming tricks, fresh gods to argue about. Stories of distant places where people claim they live without floods or taxes liars. Obviously, one evening, after yet another grueling trade trip, where you lost a basket to tolls, gained a weirdly shiny dagger, and survived a thunderstorm that made you rethink all your life choices, you stop on a hill overlooking your city. Torches flicker along the walls. Smoke curls into the evening sky, and the river glints like molten bronze under the setting sun. You think about all the feet trampling those paths now, all the voices shouting in markets across miles, all the new connections stretching beyond the horizon. Civilization isn't just local anymore. It's sprawling, ambitious, messy, and risky as hell. It's alliances made over beer, threats shouted across rivers, lies baked into clay tablets claiming everything is safe and glorious. It's humans stumbling toward a network bigger than any one king, priest, or storyteller can control. And you know deep down, these fragile, dangerous threads of trade are going to change everything if the bandits don't take their cut first. Your city has walls that mostly stand, kings who mostly shout, taxes that mostly ruin your life, and trade routes that mostly end in bandit drama. But all of that's about to look quaint, like the good old days when problems were solved with yelling and a well-thrown goat turd. Because now, humanity is about to discover the one thing worse than kings. With too much barley beer in their system, kings with dreams of empires. It starts innocently, as all terrible ideas do. Your king, Enkar's descendant, or maybe just some guy who stole Enkar's crown, during a barley binge decides your city isn't big enough anymore. He stands on a newly built balcony funded entirely by your taxes, naturally, looks out over the horizon, and says the ancient equivalent of, "I want it all." The city already feels cramped. You've got markets spilling into ditches, temples stacked like drunken mud brick wedding cakes, and traffic jams made of goats that refuse to move. But instead of fixing any of that, the king wants more land, neighboring cities, obviously theirs for the taking because the gods said so. Rivers, fields, hills, if it looks like it can hold a barley stalk or two, your king claims it. Welcome to the first game of Risk, played in real time, with real spears and rules made up on the spot. What follows is a season of conquest fever. Messengers dash between cities, carrying grand proclamations of destiny and divine right. Soldiers march out in ragged formations, half-trained and fully convinced they're about to live forever in epic songs. And you, unlucky as always, are drafted to haul supplies for the campaign. Because if there's one thing an empire needs, it's your aching back, carrying someone else's ambition on it. War, you quickly learn, hasn't gotten any less stupid since the last mudslinging ditch dispute generations ago. Only now it's on a larger scale. Picture hundreds of men yelling in different directions, spears waving like a badly choreographed dance, dust storms turning everything into chaos soup. Every battle is mostly confusion, heat stroke, and someone accidentally stabbing their own foot. The only thing truly efficient about conquest is how fast it drains the grain stores back home. Yet, somehow, cities fall. Not because your army is brilliant, honestly. Half the time the enemy just trips over their own defenses, but because terror spreads faster than truth. When word gets out that your king's gods are on the march, some cities surrender outright, handing over tribute in the hopes that divine wrath skips their door this year. Others resist, get flattened well, lightly squished. You're all still throwing sticks here and are declared liberated. Civilization invents propaganda so fast, it outruns reality. And with conquest comes a new breed of human misery. Diplomats. These poor souls are appointed to smooth relations between your city and the ones you've just trampled. Their job, to walk into smoldering ruins, smile, and say, "Great news! You're part of our glorious empire now. Please pay taxes, praise our king, and ignore the fact that we stole all your goats yesterday." Being a diplomat is basically being a glorified liar with a reed pen. They write treaties that promise peace while the ink's still wet from war. They invent alliances that last exactly until someone else offers a bigger bribe. They mediate water disputes by declaring both sides winners, knowing full well someone's going to stab someone else in a week. And they never sleep, because every city under your empire's protection is plotting rebellion by breakfast. Back home, the empire expands faster than anyone can manage. More land means more people, more barley, more myths to keep track of, and because the gods apparently love irony, more bureaucracy. New scribes are hired to tally every conquered goat, every stolen jug of beer, every donation to the king's treasury. Clay tablets pile up like bad debt. The temple expands so much it now needs its own irrigation system, just to wash away the smell of divine bookkeeping. And while the king basks in his glory, the cracks show. Conquered cities mutter curses under their breath. Trade routes choke with tolls and bribes. Soldiers return home, demanding land you don't have. Your taxes triple because apparently running an empire costs more than your king thought. And yet, every clay proclamation insists life has never been better under divine rule. One night, after hauling another tribute basket uphill, you stand on the city wall and look at the horizon. You can see the fires of distant towns your empire now owns. You hear foreign voices in the market, their tones wary, resentful, calculating. You know this isn't peace, just a pause between tantrums. An empire, you realize, isn't stability. It's a bonfire fueled by stolen grain and broken promises, burning brighter every time someone throws another life into it. But humans, being humans, don't stop. The idea of empire is intoxicating. More land means more power. More power means more myths to tell future generations about your city's great destiny. Nobody cares that you're exhausted, that the barley is running out, that every city under your rule dreams of stabbing you in your sleep. The story's too good to quit now. We were chosen by the gods. We are forever, and as you trudge home, past another royal parade, celebrating victory, you can't help but think, history isn't a noble march toward progress. It's a drunken stumble toward power, held up by people like you, praying you don't get trampled along the way. If you thought your empire's rise was chaotic, wait until you see how fast a swollen ego and a love for mud brick grandeur can choke a city to death. You've barely caught your breath from hauling tribute grain for the last glorious conquest, and now the king has another big idea. The gods need a bigger house, not just a bigger temple or monument. A building so huge, so over the top, that every neighboring city will look at it and think, wow, their gods must be rolling in divine barley. Never mind that the last temple you built is already taller than most walls and leaks like a sieve every time it rains. Apparently, the gods have expensive taste now, and you're footing the bill. 1. The construction nightmare. The king calls it a ziggurat, a fancy word for giant layered mud pie of suffering. He stands on the old temple steps, arms wide, proclaiming that this new structure will reach the heavens. The priests nod dramatically. Scribes rush to document his speech, and you're standing in the back thinking, heaven's not going to come down here just because we build a bigger ladder, pal. But, of course, you don't say that out loud. Last time someone questioned divine architecture, they ended up on permanent ditch digging duty. So begins the greatest construction project the city has ever seen. Thousands of workers, including you, are drafted. The site is chaos, mud bricks piled high, donkeys collapsing under the weight of holy clay, foremen shouting orders that contradict each other every 5 minutes. Half the workers are building, the other half are fixing what just collapsed. Every day, someone gets buried in a brick slide and climbs out cursing both king and God. The only thing that holds up better than the walls is the tax collector's appetite for your grain donations to fund this nonsense. Weeks turn into months. The project guzzles resources faster than the Market Beer Festival. Food shortages hit. People start whispering that maybe the gods don't need a sky-high mud tower, while children are eating stew made of boiled weeds. The priests counter that this suffering is a test of faith. Conveniently, their bellies never seem to be part of the test. 2. The lies pile higher than the bricks. While the ziggurat climbs toward the clouds, the official story soars even higher. Scribes carve clay propaganda at record speed. The gods personally requested this temple. No clay tablet from the gods is ever produced. This project brings prosperity to all, unless you count famine as prosperity. Our king will be remembered as divine among men, or as the idiot who bankrupted the city for a mud skyscraper. Merchants repeat these slogans in the market because it's safer than complaining. Minstrels sing songs about the king's generosity while you're eating stale barley cakes because rations got redirected to the temple project. The gap between reality and official truth grows wider than the riverbanks in flood season. And somehow nobody stops to ask if lying this much might eventually backfire. 3. The bureaucracy monster awakens. Managing an empire is already messy. Managing an empire while funneling every resource into one oversized mud tower. That's where bureaucracy comes in. New offices appear overnight, each with their own clay stamps, their own essential scribes, and their own ways of making your life hell. Department of Brick Quotas decides how many bricks your household must deliver weekly. They always demand double what's possible. Sacred Donation Bureau knocks on your door daily asking for voluntary offerings, glaring if you hesitate. Temple Workforce Registry keeps losing your name, meaning you have to queue 3 hours just to be assigned the same ditch you dug yesterday. Tablets pile up like sacrificial offerings to a god of red tape. Nobody knows who's in charge anymore. One scribe swears you owe bricks. Another says goats. A third claims you're already in prison, even though you're standing right there. Chaos spreads like mold in the damp archives. Mistakes turn into accusations. Accusations into punishments. The system collapses under its own weight, but the king insists everything is divinely efficient. 4. The meltdown. Eventually, The city cracks. Hungry families abandon their homes. Workers flee to neighboring towns, preferring bandits over bureaucracy. Trade routes clog because there's no surplus grain left to sell. And still, the ziggurat rises, sucking life out of the city one brick, one lie, one broken back at a time. Finally, one season of heavy rain hits. The river swells, the streets flood, and the half-finished monument slumps like a drunk giant trying to sit down too fast. A section collapses, killing several workers. Whispers spread. The gods are angry, not honored. Priests panic, rewriting omens overnight to blame foreign curses or lazy workers instead of royal hubris. The king orders more bricks, more taxes, more prayers, more everything. Convinced that the only way out is higher, taller, faster. But the damage is done. The city is broke, exhausted, furious. Rebellion brews in muddy alleyways, quiet but simmering. Like beer left too long in the sun, the temple's shadow no longer inspires awe. People start saying aloud what they've been thinking for years. Maybe the gods didn't ask for this. Maybe the king isn't divine. Maybe civilization doesn't have to feel like dying for someone else's glory. That night, you climb a low hill outside the city. You look back at the flickering torchlight around the monstrous, half-finished temple. It doesn't look holy. It looks desperate. A mountain of mud built on bones, crumbling under rain. It was never meant to defy. You wonder if this is progress or just vanity piled brick by brick, until it finally collapses. For the first time, you can imagine a future where the city tears down its own lies. But tomorrow, you'll still be ordered to haul bricks for the same dream that's killing you all. Civilization hasn't learned how to stop. Not yet. You thought hauling bricks for a doomed sky-scraping temple was bad. You thought endless taxes, bandits, wars, and a king drunk on barley beer were the peak of civilization's suffering. But nothing prepares you for the day sickness slithers through your city like a snake that hasn't eaten in weeks. It begins quietly. A cough in the market, a child with a strange rash, a goat that looks too tired to even chew. People shrug it off, just bad weather. Or maybe the gods are grumpy again. But soon, the coughs turn to fevers. The fevers to bodies lying still in the mud streets. And suddenly, your thriving city feels like a giant clay pot left out in the sun too long. Cracked, fragile, ready to shatter. The panic, it spreads fast. Too fast. Families barricade themselves inside huts, terrified of invisible curses floating in the humid air. The market stalls empty. Priests walk around burning herbs and chanting prayers that smell like a mixture of onions and desperation. Some people claim it's punishment from the gods for not finishing the ziggurat. Others whisper it's the king's fault. Too many wars. Too many strangers bringing bad air. You know the truth. No amount of barley beer or temple incense is going to stop this nightmare. You try to keep working because you have to eat. But every day fewer workers show up to dig ditches or haul bricks. Sometimes they're just gone by morning. Sometimes you see the clay stretchers carrying them toward the riverbank, and you know you won't see them again. The city stinks of sickness. The alleys hum with flies. Dogs and goats wander aimlessly, confused by the silence where shouting and bargaining once roared. Civilization suddenly feels as fragile as it did back in the swamp hut days, except now. There are too many people packed too close for escape to mean survival. 2. The blame game. When humans don't understand a problem, they don't fix it, they blame someone. The scribes are the first scapegoats, accused of writing bad omens that angered the gods. They protest, but quickly learn it's safer to nod and carve new omens that conveniently blame foreigners. Next, the traders take heed. They brought this curse from faraway lands, shouts one priest, forgetting that foreign goods have kept the city alive during famine years. Even the river takes the blame. People mutter that its water has turned evil, that its floods carry dark spirits. Wells are dug. Ditches are rerouted. But the sickness doesn't care. It slithers through every crack in the mud walls. Every crowd gathered for desperate prayers. Every bite of spoiled barley gruel. And of course, there's the classic, witchcraft. The city suddenly remembers every strange neighbor. Every old woman muttering to herself. Every healer whose herbs smell too strong. Accusations fly like slingshot stones. You watch, horrified, as a woman you've seen for years, always kind, always bringing goat's milk to sick children, is dragged to the temple and questioned for summoning demons, when she can't prove her innocence. Because how exactly do you prove you didn't curse the city? She vanishes. Plague isn't stopped, but at least people feel they've done something. This is the first recorded instance of panic theater, where solving the crisis matters less than finding someone to point a trembling finger at. 3. The miracle cures. Where there's fear, there's opportunity. Suddenly, everyone's a doctor. One scribe claims drinking clay water will cleanse the body. It doesn't. A priest sells blessed fish guts. As divine medicine, they smell like hell and make people sicker. Someone invents the idea of rubbing goat dung on rashes to draw out demons shockingly. That doesn't work either. The city becomes a carnival of absurd treatments, each one more desperate and disgusting than the last. People burn incense until the streets choke with smoke. They paint charms on their doors, hang rotting fish from rooftops to scare away evil spirits, and chant prayers until their voices break. The plague laughs at all of it, carving a path through rich and poor alike. The king hides in his palace, declaring from a safe distance that the gods are testing loyalty. Loyalty doesn't stop fevers. 4. The aftermath. Months pass. The sickness doesn't vanish so much as it burns itself out, leaving empty huts, abandoned fields, and too many graves to count. The city looks like a ghost version of itself. The market reopens slowly, haunted by the memory of traders and neighbors who aren't coming back. The once grand ziggurat sits unfinished, the king too afraid to demand more workers, lest another curse descend. And yet, as the air clears and barley grows again, the lies start. Priests declare the gods spared the city because of their holy rituals, conveniently forgetting the bodies still being buried. Scribes record that the wise rule of the king guided the city through disaster, as if hiding in a palace counts as leadership. The official story becomes one of triumph, of divine favor proven through suffering. History's first pandemic spin. Doctoring is born. You stand in the market one evening, watching people buy fish and beer like nothing happened. Life trudges on, but the fear lingers like a ghost in every cough, every shadowed corner. You know now how thin the veil of civilization really is. One sickness, one invisible enemy, and all the walls, temples, kings, and myths crumble into mud. The only thing that survives is the blame we fling at each other, hoping it sticks harder than the truth. And yet, here you are, alive, still standing in this mess of brick and bureaucracy, still farming barley for someone else's banquet, still part of this relentless experiment humans call a city, even knowing how fragile it is. Civilization might be a masterpiece of lies, taxes, and goat dung medicine, but it's the only thing keeping you from being a lone wanderer in a hungry world. You've survived floods, wars, bandits, divine propaganda, broken backs from hauling bricks for useless monuments, and a plague that nearly wiped out the city. You'd think humanity would take a breather, sit down, and agree not to make life more complicated than it already is. But no, because now your fellow swamp dwellers have discovered something far more dangerous than war. Romance. 1. Love in the time of goat theft. It starts as awkwardly as you'd expect from people who still smell like swamp mud most of the time. A glance across the market stalls, a smile shared over a fish that's only slightly rotten, maybe a clumsy attempt at poetry scratched into a clay tablet, reading. Your hair shines like fresh barley. Your scent is slightly better than the goat's. You're not swooning yet, but it's a start. Soon, people are pairing off, exchanging gifts of questionable quality muddy reeds woven into necklaces, shells scavenged from the riverbank, the occasional live chicken for affection. It's messy, impulsive, and very loud. Arguments about who's courting whom spill into public shouting matches, complete with thrown sandals and furious mothers. The city invents drama faster than it invents hygiene. Marriage, naturally, becomes a transaction. The same scribes who write down tax debts now scratch out love contracts. Who owns what goat? Which mud hut belongs to whom? How many baskets of barley are owed to the bride's family? Romance is beautiful until it's audited. Nothing says everlasting love like a clause that lets your in-laws repossess your donkey if you screw up. 2. Lawsuits, ancient style. Where there's love, there's heartbreak, and where there's heartbreak, there's revenge. The first courtroom is invented not to solve murders or theft, but to settle romantic disputes. You stand in line behind your neighbor as he sues his ex-lover for emotional damage and loss of goat. The judge, a priest in a too big headdress, listens solemnly, occasionally muttering to the gods for patience, while both parties scream about who started the fight over barley stew. Ancient lawsuits cover everything. He promised me 3 baskets of grain for marriage, only gave me 1. She cursed my hut after we broke up. Now my walls keep collapsing. He ran off with my chicken and my sister. Scribes record every word, turning heartbreak into official documents stored alongside tax records and war treaties. Future historians will dig up these clay tablets and think they're reading grand legal disputes, not realizing they're just ancient breakup notes carved in cuneiform. Of course, settlements are bizarre. Sometimes the judge declares a goat is worth more than a broken promise. Sometimes both parties are sentenced to community labor translation, ditch digging for disturbing public peace. Sometimes the gods are consulted via tossing bones or watching how oil floats on water. If the omen looks bad, congratulations, you're guilty of heartbreak sorcery. 3. The birth of heartbreak ballads. But humans don't just suffer. They turn their suffering into art. When lawsuits don't heal the pain, songs do. The first love ballads rise like steam from boiling barley beer. Long, dramatic wails accompanied by crude drums, and a guy blowing badly on a reed flute. Lyrics are painfully literal. She left me for a man with 3 goats. My heart is empty as my grain jar. You said forever, but forever lasted until the flood. I carved your name in clay. Now I use it as a doorstop. These songs are performed loudly in the market, ensuring that the ex in question hears every note while buying fish. Sometimes they're so catchy that other cities learn them, meaning your heartbreak is now regional gossip. Ancient civilization invents public shaming via music centuries before tabloids or pop radio. And just like myths, heartbreak songs get exaggerated. A mild spat becomes a tragic saga. A minor theft of chickens becomes a betrayal of cosmic proportions. Soon, the city's storytellers weave love, lust, and loss into epics where gods intervene, rivers cry, and the hero swears off romance forever. Until next week. 4. Love and power collide. Kings and priests quickly realize love is useful. Strategic marriages start happening, alliances sealed with barley dowries and divine blessings. Nobody cares if the bride and groom have actually met, as long as the merger gives someone more land, more water rights, or a few extra goats. Love becomes a political tool, turning weddings into miniature wars where the real battle is over contracts, not feelings. Of course, these political unions generate the juiciest scandals. Secret lovers, runaway brides, accidental poisonings at feasts. It's reality TV without the cameras, only more yelling and less clothing. Diplomats get dragged in to negotiate annulments before whole cities go to war over a broken engagement. Treaties hinge on who kisses whom and how much barley gets paid for forgiveness. Ancient politics is 20% conquest, 80% romantic disaster management. 5. Love finds a way, sort of. Despite the madness, genuine affection flickers through the noise. Two young farmers sneak away from arranged matches to meet by the river. Swearing oaths under starlight, Hotta writes secret love poems on the bottom of clay bowls, hiding words where only one pair of eyes will find them. A widow laughs for the first time in years when a fisherman gifts her his last half-decent catch. Amid the chaos, humans keep trying to love honestly. Even while civilization keeps stamping rules and contracts all over it, one evening you sit outside your hut, listening to a neighbor wail, another heartbreak song, while the city hums with gossip, laughter, and whispered promises. You realize love is the one thing no temple, no king, no scribe can fully control. They can tax it, legislate it, weaponize it, but they can't stop it. It slips through cracks like river water, stubbornly alive no matter how much mud civilization piles on top. And maybe that's the real miracle here, not walls, not writing, not gods or kings. Just two tired, muddy people finding each other in a city that forgets their names as soon as they're carved in clay. By now, your city has everything. Kings who scream divine orders while wearing mud-streaked robes, heartbreak lawsuits carved into clay tablets, and enough gossip ballads to fill an amphitheater. You've conquered neighbors, survived plagues, and accidentally invented political propaganda. Life is a beautiful, chaotic swamp. And somehow, someone looks at all this mess and says, we can make sense of it. This is where science is born, not sleek laboratories or clean equations, but a sweaty, confused experiment involving trial, error, superstition, and a lot of staring at the sky like it holds the end. Spoiler, it doesn't, at least not clearly. 1. The first smart guy. There's always one. He doesn't farm. He doesn't fight. He just watches everything and claims he understands it better than you. This man, let's call him unresolved, the thinker, spends his days poking at river mud, staring at goat entrails, and mumbling things like, if we plant on this moon, the barley grows faster. Nobody knows why he thinks this, but he says it with confidence. And in ancient times, that's the same as a PhD. Soon, the city's whispering about Uruk's discoveries. He says eclipses mean the gods are angry. He says certain reeds heal fevers they don't. He says standing on one leg while praying doubles your luck in fishing. People laugh at first, then try it. Because what if he's right? And when something occasionally works, even by accident, suddenly, he's a genius. The first scientist is born half observer, half con artist, 100% sure he's smarter than you. 2. Experimentation. Ancient style. You witness humanity's first experiments, and they're creative. Farmers divide fields into strips, trying different planting times, watering schedules, and desperate chance to see which yields more barley. One strip thrives because of good soil. Another fails because a goat slept there all week, and Uruk Ed declares this proof of divine alignment with star patterns. He invents measurements, not precise ones, just vague counts. 1 handful, 3 long steps as high as my beard. When 2 people's handfuls don't match, fights break out, proving that standardization hasn't been invented yet, but yelling has. Others join in. Furious Potter experiments with different clays and temperatures, accidentally inventing stronger bricks while trying to make eternal beer mugs. A healer tries herbs for wounds, sometimes helping, sometimes killing the patient, but always claiming it was the gods deciding. Each success becomes legend, each failure is either ignored or blamed on demons. Science, it seems, is just superstition, with better PR. 3. Stargazers and weather guessers. Then come the stargazers. Men climb ziggurats to watch the heavens, charting dots of light on clay tablets. They notice the moon swells and shrinks, stars rise and set, and they declare this cosmic order. Farmers are told to plant when the bull star rises. Fishermen are warned not to sail when the angry moon glares. Does it work? Sometimes. Is it accurate? Not even close. But it's better than random guessing. And in a world where floods still wreck your life, even the illusion of control is a miracle. Weather prediction becomes a city obsession. People watch clouds, wind, bird patterns. Goat sneezes, anything to guess if rain's coming. Scribes tally every detail, desperate to stop another famine. When it rains after a ritual, it's proof the ritual works. When it doesn't, they say someone angered the gods. Science and superstition dance together, inseparable, like 2 drunk friends, trying to build a hut without a plan. 4. The first school sort of. Knowledge spreads unevenly. Uruk Ed gets followers, young apprentices eager to learn the secrets of logic and the stars. The first school forms in a dusty corner of the temple courtyard. A bunch of kids scratching symbols in clay while their teacher explains why fish swim faster on holy days. Spoiler: they don't. Some lessons are useful, like how to build straighter canals or make beer less likely to poison you. Others are absolute nonsense, but the magic word learning starts carrying weight. Knowledge becomes power, sometimes literally enforced with sticks if you question it. For the first time, you see a divide forming. Those who know and those who don't, or rather, those who claim to know. Science, superstition, math, myths, they all tangle together into a scribbled mess that decides when you plant, how you pray, and what you believe about the world. Truth is just whatever the smartest sounding guy with a tablet says it is. 5. The spark of real discovery. Amidst the nonsense, real sparks of genius happen. Elder figures out arches hold weight better than flat roofs, saving huts from collapse. A healer washes wounds with clean water before bandaging and notices fewer infections. Someone measures time by carving sticks with notches marking days, helping predict when floods actually hit. These discoveries spread slowly, mixed with magic words and divine credit. But they stick because they work. One evening, you sit near the river, exhausted from a day of ditch digging under the guidance of temple engineers. You watch the sky turn deep purple as stars blink away. Uruk-ed himself sits nearby, scratching patterns into clay, muttering theories about how the heavens control your miserable life. You ask him, "What if you're wrong?" He grins, toothless and sunburnt, and says, "If I sound right long enough, history will call me wise." You laugh because it's true. Civilization is building its future on half-truths. Trial and error and blind guesses dressed up as divine wisdom. And yet, every now and then, buried in superstition, a real piece of knowledge glimmers like a star in the mud. Science is being born, not as cold hard fact, but as human stubbornness, refusing to stop asking why. Clumsy, loud, often wrong, but determined. The first steps toward understanding the world are messy footprints in wet clay, made by people too tired to know if they're geniuses or fools. And you know this much. Thousands of years from now, people will look back and call this era the dawn of knowledge. If only they could see how much of it came from goat entrails and lucky guesses. If you thought kings screaming divine nonsense, superstition masquerading as science, and heartbreak ballads echoing through the market were peak human absurdity, buckle up, because now civilization is about to invent its greatest nightmare. Dynasties and politics that never end. 1. Kings don't die. They multiply. Back in the good old days, read a few muddy centuries ago, leadership was simple. A loud guy grabbed a stick, yelled "I'm in charge," and everyone went along because he was bigger or drunker than you. But empires grow. Kings live too long. And the idea that someone else could take over becomes too terrifying to leave to chance. Thus is born the dynasty, when the current king finally drinks himself into the afterlife, or ascends to the gods. As the scribes phrase it, his son takes over. Not because the son has any talent, but because he has blood rights. The gods, apparently, love genetics. Unfortunately, the new king is usually a spoiled, barley beer-soaked man-child who thinks ruling is just throwing feasts and inventing new taxes for fun. You know, like his father, but worse. This doesn't just happen once. It becomes a pattern. A king rises, gets fat off your barley, dies mysteriously too much goat liver stew, and is replaced by someone even less qualified. The royal family tree turns into a gnarled mess of lazy rulers, scheming uncles, and ambitious cousins who suddenly find religion the moment the crown looks free. The entire government is now a soap opera, and you're paying for every episode. 2. Enter the bureaucratic bloodbath. With a dynasty comes court politics, the ancient version of office drama, except every argument has life or death stakes. Palace, scribes form factions. Priests plot to put their favorite prince on the throne. Advisors whisper bad ideas directly into royal ears while pretending they were divinely inspired. Suddenly, the king isn't making decisions about water rights or trade routes. He's deciding whether to banish his brother, marry his half-sister for political unity, or accuse someone of treason because they didn't clap hard enough during a feast. Your city now has an entire class of people who don't farm, don't build, don't fight wars, they just play politics. They scribble notes, pass rumors, attend council meetings that last 3 days, and achieve nothing except more infight. Ancient politics is the world's first reality show. Scripted drama, bad acting, and way too many costumes paid for with your taxes. 3. The ancient HR department, spies and assassins. Where there's power, there's paranoia. Kings hire spies to eavesdrop in taverns, pretending they're just bad musicians playing in the corner while memorizing who's plotting what. Clay tablets with secret intelligence start circulating, full of half-truths and goat-related metaphors that nobody understands. And when gossip isn't enough, out-tongue the assassins. Poisoned beer mugs, falling roof tiles, accidental spear pokes during royal hunts. You realize that being king isn't glamorous. It's just being the most obvious target in a city where ambition grows faster than barley. Succession becomes less about bloodlines and more about surviving dinner parties. 4. The rise of the yes men. In this mess, a new profession is born. The professional flatterer. These people exist solely to agree with the king. If he says the moon is made of fermented fish, they nod vigorously and write hymns about it. If he demands a law banning sneezing near temples, they clap like he's a genius. Logic dies in the throne room because nobody wants to be the guy who says, "That's a bad idea," and ends up buried under divine punishment, aka a conveniently placed rock slide. And policies, they're made on whims. One day, you're free to fish in a river. The next, the king bans it because his horoscope said avoid scales. Next week, his cousin declares fishing sacred again because his god dreamed of it. You've got no clue what's legal anymore. But you know the fines always cost exactly as much as a week's food. 5. The forgotten people. Wow, palace drama devours itself. Life for everyone else doesn't get easier. The ditches still flood. Trade caravans still get robbed. Farmers still break their backs for harvests that mostly end up in royal feasts. The only time the king remembers you exist is during tax season, or when he needs cannon fodder for another divine war. Rebellions simmer, but rarely boil over. Why? Because each time someone hints at uprising, politics throws you a distraction. A royal wedding here, a sacred festival there, promises of new irrigation canals that never materialize. They've mastered the art of keeping you too busy or too entertained to burn down the palace. It's ancient bread and circuses, except the bread is stale, and the circus is mostly drunk guys juggling clay pots. 6. The great office politics. Fiasco. 1 year, the dynasty faces a crisis. 2 princes claim the throne after the king chokes on a fishbone during a feast. Both swear the gods favor them, Both have their own factions of priests and scribes backing them, and both start throwing mud literally and politically. Clay tablets fly across the city, accusing each other of heresy, goat theft, and bad hygiene. Oh, this drags on for months, leaving the city leaderless. Trade halts, taxes double to fund the holy succession, and random thugs start calling themselves temporary governors. The common folk are forced to take sides in a royal family fight they don't care about by the time one prince wins, meaning his assassins were just slightly quicker. The city's treasury is empty, half the army's gone rogue, and nothing's been fixed. It's history's first full-blown bureaucratic meltdown, brought to you by nepotism, paranoia, and goat politics. One evening, you lean against a crooked wall, watching the palace glow under torchlight, as servants rush in out, carrying sealed tablets and bribe baskets. You think back to the days when leadership was just one loud idiot yelling over irrigation ditches. Somehow, civilization has managed to make government worse. Not better, an endless cycle of power plays, paranoia, and poor decisions, carved forever into clay. And yet, here you are, still farming, still paying taxes, still holding bricks when ordered, because civilization keeps running on your back while kings squabble over who gets the fancy hat. History, you realize, isn't a noble march toward greatness. It's an ancient office party that got out of control, where the interns never stop working and the bosses never stop stabbing each other in the back. You've seen it all. The mud huts, the irrigation trenches, the first goat-fueled lawsuits, heartbreak songs echoing through alleyways, kings building mud towers to touch the gods, dynasties tearing themselves apart over fish bones. Civilization promised safety, prosperity, glory. Instead, it feels like you've been trapped inside a drunken theater play where everyone's improvising badly, and you're stuck doing all the heavy lifting behind the scene. And now, you're about to watch the whole show fall apart. 1. When an empire runs out of band-aids, it doesn't happen in one day. Despite what future storytellers will claim, civilizations don't collapse like walls. They rot slowly, like goat meat left out in the sun. First, there's famine. The rivers shift course again because nature doesn't care about your carefully dug ditches. Fields dry up, harvests shrink, and everyone pretends praying harder will bring rain instead of just more blisters from begging the gods on your knees. Then come the trade problems. Remember those glorious trade routes where bandits robbed you politely for a toll? Now raiders show up in full force, not just stealing goods, but torching caravans. Foreign cities that once paid tribute stop answering royal messengers. Suddenly, your city's empire looks like a drunk man's fantasy scribbled on a clay tablet. A network of places that hate you just enough to stop sending barley when you need it most. Taxes double, then triple. Because kings and priests believe the solution to poverty is take more from the poor. People abandon farms. Families flee to the hills, preferring wild survival to starving in a city supposedly protected by gods, too busy arguing over sheep livers to stop the misery. And slowly, the ziggurats and palaces that once screamed power start to look like gravestones for a dream that's dying. 2. The riots begin. Starving people don't stay quiet. Markets fill with shouting not about prices, but survival. Tax collectors vanish in alleys, never to be seen again, probably eaten by goats, if the rumors are to be believed. Workers refuse to build another temple when their own roofs are collapsing. The king declares divine punishment for disobedience. But the god's credibility has been stretched thinner than last season's grain rations. One day, you see it firsthand. A crowd storms the palace gates, torches in hand, faces painted with mud like warriors of old. They chant not for new kings or more gods, but something simpler. We've had enough. The guards hesitate. The royal family flees through the back door. For a brief, electric moment, the city belongs to its people. And you wonder if this is freedom, muddy, bloody, desperate freedom. But freedom nonetheless. 3. Civilization takes a nap. Weeks turn into months. Without a king screaming orders, the city changes. Some things get better. No one's hauling bricks for vanity towers anymore. No priests demanding extra donations for divine beer feasts. People trade freely, share food, mend walls together, instead of waiting for royal approval. That never comes. It feels almost like the early days again, when survival was brutal but honest. But other problems don't go away. Floods still come. Raiders still attack. Arguments over land and goats still spiral into violence. Without some kind of order, chaos lurks just beneath the surface. Civilization didn't fix human nature, but it did give it a script. Without it, you're back to shouting in the mud, just louder this time. And slowly, new leaders creep out of the shadows. Not kings yet, just organizers, strong voices saying, we need rules, we need walls, we need structure. It starts as cooperation, then command, then control. You've seen this play before. It always ends the same way. Someone builds a bigger hut, calls it a palace, claims the gods love them best, and boom, civilization wakes up again, dragging its old problems with a shiny new coat of mud. For the first cynics, not everyone is thrilled about this endless cycle. Among the rubble of the old palace, philosophers emerge, not wise men in white robes, just tired farmers and scribes sitting around saying out loud what everyone's thinking. Maybe kings aren't divine. Maybe they're just greedy. Maybe the gods don't care about our ditches and goats. Maybe cities are just big cages where we work harder to starve slower. These aren't popular opinions. Priests call them heresy. Aspiring leaders call them dangerous. But in quiet moments, under starlit skies, you hear these whispers spreading. People have tasted freedom, even if it was chaotic and bloody. And some wonder if maybe, just maybe, the price of civilization isn't worth the promises that never came true. 5. A loop that never ends. And yet, even cynics need food, need shelter, need each other. Slowly, inevitably, the city rebuilds. New rulers rise, promising they'll be different this time. New temples climb toward the sky, swearing the gods truly favor you now. New taxes, new wars, new myths, new heartbreak ballads. The same cycle, repackaged with fresh clay tablets and shinier seals. One evening, you stand by the riverbank watching the sunset burn gold over crumbling ziggurats and half-repaired walls. Children play nearby, splashing in water that's destroyed more homes than you can count, laughing like they don't know how fragile all this is. Maybe they don't. Maybe that's what keeps people building cities long after every collapse. The stubborn hope that next time will be better. You don't believe it. Not entirely. But you also know you'll keep farming barley tomorrow. Keep hauling bricks if someone shouts loud enough. Keep living in this messy miracle called civilization. Peace, for all its lies, greed, and stupidity, it's the only thing humans have figured out so far that feels like something bigger than themselves. And as the stars blink awake overhead, you can't help but laugh. Thousands of years from now, people will call this the dawn of civilization. Like it was glorious and noble. Not a mud-caked improv tragedy full of bad kings, screaming neighbors, and goat-related lawsuits. Let them believe it. Maybe every generation needs the same story, that we're building something grand, that this time we'll get it right, that civilization isn't just a trap we can't stop walking into.